So I've pulled the after lunch slot, and I'm about to talk to you in depth about Elvish philology. So please bear with me. And this is some work I've been doing around looking at Tolkien's Elvish languages from different perspectives. So I'm trying out some new stuff here. So I look forward to lots of thoughts and comments on it. In his legendarium, Tolkien tells us how the two children of Iluvatar, the firstborn elves and the secondborn men, came to be in Ardor, and also how they are fated to eventually leave it. In this short paper, using Tolkien's foundational statement from his drafts of fairy stories, mythology is language and language is mythology, I want to explore how Tolkien used his coeval language invention to construct base roots and associated words which would enter the legendarium to both signify and commemorate these two key events. I will explore these examples on the handout that you have. When it comes to describing the birth of Elves and Men, Tolkien constructs two key place names that have within their morphological makeup some of the key mythic concepts that Tolkien describes in the narratives of these Elves and Men. The key mythic theme that both these origin stories emphasize is that both elves and the fathers of men were not created in Ardor, but awoke in it. The creation being achieved, as it were, offstage by Iluvatar himself. This mythic theme is apparent in two key place names where this awakening occurs. The first one is first known by the Elvish word koivieni, which later becomes the more familiar known word Qenya, and the second word where men awoke is called Merman Alda. On the first part of your handout, you'll notice the first Qenya base root is Koyo, K-O-Y-O. This is what's found in the Qenya lexicon, which is the earliest version we have of the Qenya language that Tolkien started working on circa spring 1915. From Koyo, Tolkien constructs words which connect the ideas of life, living, and coming to life with awakening. The early form of this place name itself is formed from a gerundal form of one of these words and another base root for water, nen. Starting in Gnomish and then in the Noldoran language of the 1920s, which is the precursor of Sindarin, the ko phoneme becomes ku, from which Tolkien constructs a series of related words, including a Gnomish name for this place of awakening, Nenin y Guivros, which is on your handout, but still meaning waters of awakening. In the etymologies of the 1938, the Qenya base root Koyo becomes the Eldarin proto-root Ku, K-U-Y. But as you can see, the association with ideas of coming to life by awakening persists, as in the later Qenya form of this place name, Qvienen, which now Tolkien parses as Quivi, meaning awakening, and then water. This sense of awakening begs the question, what did the elves awaken from? In the earliest conceptual versions of this tale, there is evidence that this is more than just an awakening. In the Book of Lost Tales, Manwë asks the embassy of elves, quote, "Tell us how ye came, how found you the world?" One of the elves, Nolame, responds, quote, "For meseems I awoke but now from a long sleep, internally profound, whose vast streams are already forgotten." Another elf, Tinwë, describes this as, quote, "Thereto his heart told him that he was new come from illimitable regions, yet he might not recollect by what dark and strange passes he had been brought." In his commentary to this passage, Christopher Tolkien states, quote, "The story of the questioning of the three elves by Manwë concerning the nature of their coming into the world and their loss of all memory of what preceded by their awakening did not survive the lost tales." And indeed, in later conceptual versions of this story, the elves just awake, with no real sense or exploration of what they have awakened from. However, there is an intriguing fragment, which is on the top part of your handout, that the late Tolkien scholar Townsend Towski discovered in the Tolkien archives at Marquette on the back of some papers that Tolkien was drafting for the chapter The Riders of Rohan, so we're talking mid-1940s here, which was published in Vinoir Tangwar. In this passage, it states in Qenya, Elder ando kakainen lorelayon kovinesen. The elves were long lying asleep at Koivieni. The word for asleep in this fragment, lorelayar, is derived from the base root loro, which in the Qenya lexicon and later etymologies is one of the varying forms used to construct words having to do with sleeping, as in the Qenya verb lor, meaning to slumber, as well as dreaming, as in the related word olor, meaning dream, and olorin, which is one of the names, of course, for the Astari Gandalf. The place names Quivieni and later Quivienen, formed from this key base root, marks and signifies this act of awakening with an echo of forgotten dreams which only seemingly remain and can be revealed in the way Tolkien signifies it through his language invention. The genesis of men in Tolkien's mythology, like their ultimate fate, is far more murkier. Probably the most extensive treatment in this mythology is again in the Book of Lost Tales. Here it is one of the elves who stay behind from the Great March who come upon a place in the east called Merman Alda, the Vale of Sleep, which contains sleeping forms. And he quotes, and some were twined each in other's arms, and some lay sleeping gently all alone. As with the morphological construction of the place name Quivienen, the place name Mermanalda also signifies this act of sleeping, dreaming, and awakening from sleep. As you can see at the bottom of the first page of your handout, the morphological heart of this place name is the base root moru, which in the Qenya lexicon means just to slumber. But in the Gnomish lexicon, Tolkien uses the same form to construct the word mirtha, which means to dream, and the related word mure, meaning a nightmare or vision of the night. Thus again, as with the Quivienen, he's mixing ideas here of sleeping and dreaming and awakening. In later conceptual versions of the legendarium, the birth of men is not widely described, and by the time of the etymologies, the word mauer has come just to mean gloom, and has lost this idea of dream altogether. But the word that continues to appear again and again in the legendarium about men is that they awake. They're not created. But if elves and men share a common type of origin in their coming into Arda, then going out or dying is quite different, and indeed is a differentiating fate that is at the core of Tolkien's mythos. As Tolkien said in a letter about his legendarium, and I'm quoting a quote that was just quoted earlier, the real theme for me is about something more permanent and difficult, death and immortality. The mystery of the love of the world in the hearts of a race doomed to leave and seemingly love it, the anguish in the hearts of a race doomed not to leave it until its whole evil aroused story is complete. Starting in the Book of Lost Tales, Tolkien wrote, "The Eldar dwell in the world to the great end, unless they be slain or waste in grief. Nor doth eld subdue their strength, except it may be in 10,000 centuries, and dying they are reborn in their children, so that their numbers diminish not nor grow." The Elvish fate was to remain in Arda until the end of their world. And a key concept attached to this duration is the grief of the fading of the elves. Men, on the other hand, die and are given the gift and freedom to go beyond the circles of the world, as we heard this morning in the quote that Aragorn says at his deathbed about going past the circles of the world. In terms of the fates of elves and men, and this is on the second page of your handout, as outlined in the handout, Tolkien invented several base roots to signify the contrasting aspects of their death. In some cases, these roots and intended words can apply to methods of death elves and men share, namely being killed or slain in battle, while in others, Tolkien invents base roots and intended words that delineate the differences in elvish and mortal death. The slaying of elves and men in Arda, primarily in battle, is signified by the early Qenya base root maka, which is the first one on your page, from which Tolkien constructs several words for slaughter and the noun for battle, maka, as well as the name of an early Valar that does not survive the Book of Lost Tales, Makar, the god of war. In the etymologies, the Qenya base root becomes the Eldarian root mak, now having slightly more focused meaning of specifically sword, or as a verb to fight with a sword. So no more about being slain, but fighting with a sword to cause someone to be slain. Whereas a new Proto-Eldarian base root in the etymologies signifies being slain, and that's nadak, N-D-A-K, from which Tolkien constructs related Elvish words such as the Old Noldoran verb nadaki, to slay, and nadango, slain, which in Noldoran loses the N and becomes degi, to slain, and doyen, a word for corpse. The significance of the key fate of the elves to remain in Arda until the great end, and its sense to die by fading grief or weariness, what Christopher Tolkien in his commentary calls a type of elvish death, is signified by two key base roots that Tolkien first invented in the Qenya lexicon, and then continued to develop in different conceptual phases of his language invention. These enter as the Qenya base roots kala and kele, and they're on the next part of your handout. Kala starts out meaning die, and from which Tolkien constructs words for death, dead, and deadly. Kela also means die, but has an additional meaning of perish, decay, and fail. And some of the words that Tolkien constructs from this base are words for perish, ruin, utter end, corpse, and carcass. In the etymologies, Tolkien brings the Kala Qenya base root in now as a Proto-Eldarin root, qual, where he gives it a more specific meaning of dying in pain, and also the word agony. But in an interesting note in the entry to this etymologies, Tolkien states that in Noldoran, another base root replaced qual in developing words around agony and death. This base root is wan, W-A-N, meaning depart, go away, disappear, and vanish, which also becomes associated with words around death and being departed, as you can see on your handout. Wan itself is an interesting proto-root, as it both suggests the English word wan, which means pale, gloomy, and faded, coming from the Old English word wan, dark or black, and also in Tolkien's own Elvish, looks back to a related earlier Qenya base root, vaha, from which Tolkien constructed several words for going away, things being passed, and over. And probably the most known example of its use here is in the name of the cottage of lost play in Qenya, Marvanya Talibia, the cottage of lost play. Thus, in the application of this base root in Noldoran, the language of the exiled elves, Tolkien brings together, through these two proto-roots, the ideas of agony, pain, and death with the fading and weariness of the elves. The linking of feeling pain and agony with fading appears in the late dialogue about elvish immortal death, the Athrabath of Finrod and Andred, which several people have mentioned already. When the mortal Andred says to the elf Finrod, "What know ye death? To you it may be in pain, it may be bitter and a loss, but only for a time." The other base root, kele, which means perish, die, decay, and fail, follows a similar linguistic trajectory that focuses it more on the idea of fading. The first focusing of this root can be seen in the Gnomish lexicon, where Tolkien posits that a reconstructed word, quell, means specifically fade or wither. In the etymologies, kele becomes the Proto-Eldarin base root quell, and Tolkien specifically associates it with the title of his earliest poem composed in Qenya in early 1916, Narquelion, now being given a new specific meaning as fire fading. And this is indeed a poem about fading and withering, of seasons, trees, and of course of the elves. In some notes of this entry in the etymologies published in Vineyard Tangor 45, Tolkien also constructs the word lasequelne, which means leaf fading, and he contrasts that with the alternative word lasilanta, meaning leaf falling. So the base roots, kela and kala, seem to have become more specifically associated with the fading of the elves and the agony and grief that this caused as part of their fate to remain within the circles of Arda until the great end. The fact that Tolkien invented two Qenya base roots, which persisted in varying forms, shows that this was a key concept for the elves to have in the many different and nuanced words they had in their languages to describe this state. Thus, since these true early roots throughout the process of Tolkien's early language conception became more focused on the specific elvish fate of fading in the development of his languages, in the etymologies, Tolkien invents another specific Proto-Eldarin root to signify in Elvish the death of men, namely fear, and that's on the next page of your handout, from which comes the Elvish words for being dead by natural causes, fearin, mortals, firma, and human, firya. Most intriguingly, the word for natural death as an act is fair, and the noun for dead is fair, F-E-R-N. In a related note in the etymologies, Tolkien wrote in the margin, fear, die of natural causes, not as elves, hence fear about mortal. In terms of the word fair, meaning death by natural act, there may be an interesting link here to an earlier, older Quenya-based root, phaya, F-A-Y-A, which in the Qenya lexicon forms the word fair, meaning free and freedom. This suggests that Tolkien may be linking the two key ideas of mortal death and freedom from the circles of the world. In the original The Music of the Ainur, death for men is called, quote, the freedom to go beyond the original music. Another word in this entry is fairn, the noun for dead. As an interesting, although tentative connection, and here like a stand-up comedian, I'm trying some new material, this same word form appears in Sir John Rhys's 1882 work, Celtic Britain, in which Rhys reported that the language of the pre-Celtic Aboriginal inhabitants of the British Isles, which Rhys called Ivernian, the Iron language, was preserved in a glossary by an Irish king bishop. He did record two words known to him, fairn, meaning anything good, and ond, meaning a stone. As several Tolkien scholars have explored, Tolkien remembered reading this passage by Sir John Rhys when he was inventing his lexicon, and clearly beyond stone one was one Tolkien certainly used in his name invention. Think of Gondor, Gondolin, etc. Since doing my PhD thesis, I've been searching throughout the corpus for where Tolkien may have used fairn, anything good, and this is the closest I've come to it so far. Is there a suggestion here that death for men, i.e. being able to leave the circles of the world and go beyond, was originally a good thing that was perverted by the evil of Melkor? Indeed, as the mortal Andrad says in the Athrobeth, quote, death is but the name that we gave to something that he, Melkor, has tainted, and it sounds therefore evil. But unattained, its name would be good. Death for man was originally a good thing. Indeed, it was, and possibly is, a gift to leave the circles of the world. Men were just guests, as the elves called them in Arda, and had an ultimate unknown to all, which was a good thing until it was perverted by Melkor. Tolkien's invention of several key base roots related words to signify the different aspects of both elvish and mortal death shows how complex and interwoven this theme was in the mythic structure of Tolkien's legendarium. As with the words and roots for how elves and men entered Arda, while the words for death make certain distinctions, they also show some shared themes of the two gifts that Iluvatar gave to elves and men. In both cases, elves and men will die. As stated in the Athrobeth, quote, man had a shadow behind them, but the elves had a shadow before them. Men die and leave the circles of the world, but elves too will die at the end of Arda. What happens next for both races only is known to Iluvatar himself. Through his imaginative process of combined co-evolved and intertwined mytho and glossopoeia, Tolkien depicted how the two children of Iluvatar came to be in and leave Arda, two gifts in harmony given to the elves and the fathers of men, who both awoke in Arda and would eventually, through the paths of their own fates, come back together beyond the end of time. Thank you. 5 minutes. Questions, comments? Yes?
I'm fascinated by etymology and linguistics, so no, this is not something to see. So I just want to pick up on something you mentioned at the end, and that is the work from the 1880s that Tolkien read and was
Yes.
very good. Because I wonder sometimes how, Tolkien is not free from the world that he lives in. So I wonder, to what extent real world etymology, as I call it, kind of comes in to Tolkien's things. And as you were talking, I was struck by a couple of things there. One is Kui, K-U-Y,
Yes.
which you can pronounce it in a different way, Kui,
Which
which gives, there's a Proto-Indo-European root kwa for water. So he's turning it round. He's taking the waters of life, the kwa element, and turning it into the awakening. So there's a kind of playing with the real world etymology. The muru, to slumber, there's a German Murmeltier, which is the marmoset, which sleeps a lot.
Interesting one as well.
The Mure is your Anglo-Saxon Maya, which is the prototype for our nightmare. Nightmare
Yes.
is a horse, but he's this sort of night-going spirit. And qual, K-W-A-L, again, there's a word qual in German, which means exactly what Tolkien is using here, namely torture. So, and I just wonder how, especially the early English lexicon are still more influenced by real-world etymology, and then as Tolkien matures with his work, he's trying to deliberately move away from that.
I agree completely, and I think especially in the Qenya lexicon, Tolkien's very ludic. He's playing around with lots of things, and we have all kinds of fun work. If you go through that Qenya lexicon, there's all kinds of fun stuff in there. I think where I know, and Tolkien in a letter, very late in his life, Tolkien remembered reading Sir John Rhys's Celtic Britain. And I think he calls it, I read a little book when I was about 7 or something like that. It's actually not a very little book, but that's Tolkien. I think what Tolkien objected to, and when we got into this whole period after The Lord of the Rings comes out, when a lot of people try to go through his nomenclature and just say, aha, so Sauron must be Anglo-Saxon for this. And we have these people called the decoders who were trying to decode all of Tolkien's languages. I think there's a medium there. I think Tolkien was very probably aware of all of those things, and in a way he was trying to use his language invention to incorporate all of that kind of idea in there. But also he wanted to create an inner consistency of reality within his languages himself, so they would stand on their own. So yes, moray could be mare from nightmare, but also he invented a base root so that it would have applicability in his language itself. So I think you're working on two different strands, and kind of where I like my research to go is to look more at what Tolkien was doing in his own languages to create that same sense of inner consistency of reality as you had in the text. So yes, this is based on this and this is based on that, but how does it ground itself in the work itself? Absolutely. Yes?
You mentioned at the beginning of the talk about the Elf awakening.
Yes.
From the sleep. When Tolkien came to write about the Ents and about them waking up, and their description of falling asleep as well.
Yes.
Did you play around with any of the philology?
The only thing I looked at, which I didn't include just for time, is any other time, like when the dwarves are created by Ale in the Silmarillion, they're created, they're made in the earth, they're not awoken. Oh, right. So my sense here is that what happened is Iluvatar created these creatures off stage and then placed them in Arda. Now, Ents is an interesting one, though. I should look at that because it does say Yavanna awoke the trees or something like that somewhere. Yeah, so that's good. Dimitra.
That was great, Andy. Thank you very much. Second page of the handout. Talk to me a little bit more about this change of that one stem, and why the consonant change from L to N and the change in meaning at the same time. Do you see a sort of sound symbolic thing going on?
I think there might be something going on there, and I also think what he was trying to do was equate this idea of death and departing, especially with the Noldoran elves as well, and that's why it's only in Noldoran that this root appears in everything. So I think he was playing around with that, and then from that would be words created that would have within them that one kind of applicability, basically, is the base root. Yeah. And also, I think with qual, there is that sense of agony, isn't there? There's a feeling, there's some sound sense going on there, definitely, I think, yeah. Because agony only appears when he makes that change, basically. So you go from kala to qual. And that K to KW happens a lot when you go from the Qenya to from the Qenya lexicons to the etymologies. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.